Well, it's been another great day watching the beautiful birds along Oak Creek Canyon. But you don't have to go hiking to see the birds, although it's a great idea. You can watch the birds in your own backyard. Here I am at Jay's Bird Barn in beautiful Sedona, Arizona. And today I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about setting up a great backyard so you can enjoy watching the birds. It's a great hobby, and you know what? It makes you feel better, and it helps the birds at the same time, so stay tuned. Well, now that my bird watching is over for the day, I want you to be able to set up the perfect backyard so you can enjoy watching the birds the way I do, whatever kind of bird you want. But getting birds to come to your backyard, that's a whole other thing. You just can't put a sign on the front that says, "Welcome birds." You got to really attract them. So I'm here today with Dina, who's the manager of Jay's Bird Barn in Sedona. Hey Dina, how are you?
Hi,
Good to see you. I want to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, let's go into bird watching versus bird feeding. Are there a lot of people that are into the hobby of bird watching?
It's amazing. People love birds. And right now, the latest figure I heard was that bird watching is the second outdoor activity next to gardening.
Really?
So people really love to go out there and just enjoy the birds, be in nature, and see what comes to them as they're out hiking, exploring.
Well, there's nothing more relaxing. I know I get up early in the morning. I'm one of those people that's up at 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock. I wake the birds up in my backyard. And I sit there, you know, with my cup of coffee and just waking up to the sound of birds. Boy, it beats an alarm clock any day of the week, doesn't it?
Yep.
What is let's say someone wants to get started in the backyard bird feeding business. Now, when I say business, I mean they want to feed birds in their yard. So they go out and they buy a birdhouse, and they go to the supermarket and they buy a bag of seed, and they assume they're doing everything right, but yet the birds aren't coming, or they're only attracting the same type of bird. Does the type of food really make a major difference, and the type of feeder make a major difference in terms of being able to attract the specific type of birds that you're looking for?
It absolutely does. And I'd like to show you the difference
Yeah,
in some
come
of
on,
these.
let's go take a look, yeah.
Explain.
I mean, when people go into the supermarket and they see a bag of seed, and yet you come in here and everything is just so set up so people can really know what they're doing.
If people go to a store, a non-birding type store, they'll get a bag of seed, and it has a lot of filler in it. And what we mean by filler is this stuff. It's called milo and wheat, and birds don't eat that. It's not nutritious, and they know it. And so they're kicking it out, making a mess. It's sprouting up, making weeds in your yard. They're looking for the few black oil sunflower seeds in there, which have high protein, high fats. And you don't think of birds needing fat, but birds need a lot of fat. It's very important to their neurological system.
That's why suet's an important aspect.
Suet, exactly. And for baby birds especially, that's why birds feed their baby birds worms, even if they're seed eaters. They'll feed their babies worms because of the high fat content and high protein, again for the neurological development. So even though the adults might be eating seeds, they might be feeding their babies bugs.
You know, it's interesting that you brought that up because, you know, when I was growing up, no one bought birdseed.
Yeah.
They would take the white bread, whatever was left over, and they'd feed it to the birds in the backyard, they'd feed it to the ducks. And now I explain to people that giving white bread to ducks and geese to the pond and birds has really no nutrition for them. It may fill up their belly, but it's really not the healthy fats and proteins that they really need. So when people say to you, "Dina, should I feed my birds in my backyard bread?" What's your response?
I'd say no, because the white bread, you can picture feeding your children white bread their entire lives.
Exactly.
You know, you're not going to, the child might survive, but they're not going to thrive. They're not going to be healthy. So you want to give the birds so that they can reproduce, so they can migrate, all the nutrition they need to send them on their way and be healthy birds.
Now here's a mistake that I find all the time, and it's amazing, and we're going to get into some of the seeds in a little while. I used to live in New York, although none of you would know that from my accent, okay? And one of the problems that I've been screaming at people, if you start feeding the birds, you have to feed them all year round because sometimes they won't migrate if there's a food source there. That's what we found on the East Coast. Do you find that here as well?
You know, not so true. It's really kind of a myth that's been popularized, and the reason being is that birds are used to exploiting their food source, wherever that happens to be. If that's a wild weed lot next to your house, if that's out in the fields, out in the canyons, wherever it is, birds are used to exploiting that food source, and then they move on, which happens to be the next weed patch. So they look at your backyard simply as a weed patch.
It's like a fast food.
Exactly.
Check in, drive through,
when
go
that
out.
food is there and available, they're going to eat it. If it's not there, they're going to move to the next weed patch, which might be your next door neighbor, or it might be the vacant lot.
So it's a
Next to it.
fallacy that if you're feeding birds in a colder climate and you're feeding them in the fall, that you're preventing them from migrating.
Absolutely.
That's a fallacy.
They're going to move on.
Okay.
They are programmed genetically, biologically. When the sun angle changes in shorter days, they're ready to head south.
What about the different species of birds? Before we go over the seeds, are there different seeds, different types of foods, different types of houses, which we'll go through later, that will attract certain, let's say I want, oh, I don't know, let's say I want a yellow titmouse to come to my house. First bird that pops into my head. What would I do? What kind of seed would I use for that type of bird?
Well, titmice, they like a variety of seeds. They like the black oil sunflower seed, which is probably the best seed that anybody could feed. It's the black oil seed, not the striped sunflower seed, which has a harder shell, but the black oil seed has a softer shell, so it's easier for seed cracking birds to open that up and get the nut meat out of it. It has some of the highest protein and highest fat of any seed that we sell.
So if you're going to have one type of seed in your backyard, this would be the type
It
of
would
seed.
be black oil.
Now, wild birds, I know with people that keep domestic birds like parrots, it's important that they really, really get a good diet. And a lot of people that have pet birds just feed them seeds, but you can feed them pasta, you can feed them even chicken. It sounds a little cannibalistic, but they need a variety in
Sure.
their life. Outdoor birds as well, even though this is a great start, they can survive just on this because they're eating other things that are out in the wild.
Exactly. But to give them a variety of seed, what we recommend is to give them, a blend, a mix of a lot of different seeds in it. So this has a lot of the black oil sunflower seed. It also has the striped sunflower seed. So birds with bigger beaks that are meant for crushing and cracking larger seeds would do well with that black oil sunflower seed. Cardinals love safflower seed, and that's the little white one in there. So depending on what you're attracting, what you'd like to bring into your yard, you can pick a variety of seeds that has it all, or you can just pick one variety of seed to attract a certain type of
So
bird.
if you pick the one that the
Cardinals?
cardinals like, and you put more of that out there,
Right.
you'll be able to attract more cardinals.
Exactly.
If you want more sparrows,
Yep.
you put a different type of seed out there.
Right.
Yet this, they're all kind of eat.
This
So you
is
might
a
have
variety.
This is like a New York community.
Right.
Everyone gets along.
Exactly.
What about predators? We were talking about this a little bit earlier. A lot of people are under the assumption that if you're going to hang a bird feeder in your yard, you should hang it in an area that's kind of free of predators, which is pretty much impossible. And we were joking before, because you had a picture of a cat watching through the glass, and you say the birds are smart enough or astute enough to pick up the fact that there's a piece of glass between them and the cat, and therefore the
Exactly.
cat can't get to them.
You know, at first it might be a little intimidating that cat's right there, and the cat might even pounce toward the bird, but the birds very quickly learn that they don't have to be afraid because of that glass pane that's between them. So they'll come right up to a window and they'll feed, even though there's a cat right there watching them.
So you're saying, and I've been telling you guys for a long time, that every species is intelligent, every species has their own way of surviving. So you as a bird expert would say that birds are pretty darn smart.
They're
They
amazing.
haven't survived all these years without being that bright.
Absolutely. Now, you don't want the cats to go outside.
Mm-hmm.
That's something else, because cats are predators, and they're going to catch birds and bring them in
It's a
as
gift.
gifts.
It's a gift.
As
And
gifts.
you can't yell at them. It's like
No.
it's like your husband bringing you home a diamond ring and you saying, I don't want it.
No, they're
You can't
just,
do that.
exactly. That's just their instinct, is to catch something that's flying, moving. They want to
I've
pounce.
been known years ago. I don't have any cats at the moment, but I believe in indoor cats,
Yeah.
or at least teaching them to walk on a leash and harness.
Right.
So it's interesting. But years ago, my cats would show up with, and I had a farm in upstate New York, which is a pretty rural area, and they'd show up with a mouse or whatever, and you have to say thank you.
Exactly.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
You can't
They
say
don't mean any
no.
harm.
They
They're
don't mean any
trying
harm.
to-
We all got to survive
Yeah.
it. So I'm seeing from here now. This is really important. Okay. If you see, we have the black oil sunflower. We have a select blend. We have a wasteless blend. Is that for fat birds?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's for what? Now that
The
means
wasteless, why it's called wasteless is because much of what is in here has been hulled. So the shells, the holes have been taken off so that you are not paying. It'd be like buying skinless, boneless chicken breast. You're paying for the bone if you're paying by weight. So this way, all the holes have been taken off. You're just paying for the seed itself. So even though it's more expensive because you're paying for that, taking off the shell, but you're getting a better deal because there's no waste
there's
in
no
it.
and nutritionally.
Nutritionally, it's all the same
So the
nutrition.
shell has no nutritional value
No,
for the birds?
none at all.
It's all what's inside
It's
the
all
shell?
what's inside.
Ah, interesting.
Yep.
And the half and half blend and the white Proso millet, the sunflower chips. See, it's like going to the Kellogg's cornflakes or Pop, whatever you want to eat. But it's important, and that's why I say if you're going to be starting a hobby, feeding birds in your backyard, Don't just listen to someone like me. Go to a store like Jay's Bird Barn. Go somewhere where there's an expert that can say, you know what, this is the area I live in. Let's face it, I grew up on Long Island, now I live in Santa Monica, I live in Sedona. I have all different types of birds wherever I go. So I say go to a local so they know exactly what type of birds are in the area. What are the most common birds that people are trying to attract, for example, in the Sedona or Central Arizona area?
Well, in this area, our backyard birds would be things like the cardinals, and this is the farthest west that we have cardinals, so that we're very fortunate here in Sedona. There are no cardinals in California,
Believe me, I've
in
looked
Santa
for them.
Monica, but we have them here, so we're just very fortunate that we can attract cardinals into our yard. We have birds like the canyon towhee is a popular backyard bird. The spotted towhee, a beautiful orange and black and white spots on the wings, very colorful bird in our backyard. We have the juniper titmouse in our backyard, a cute little titmouse with a little tuft on his head. We have bush tits. They come in flocks and they will gather together on the feeders and pull out the seed. Little tiny little gray bird, but a lot of personality in that little gray bird. We have robins in this area year-round. Now they're not seed eaters, they're worm eaters, as we know. But if you're creating habitat and feeding birds, we also encourage people to plant native plants so that you can attract the local birds in the area for nesting purposes, for the berries that plants produce. And we have information that we can give people on what plants to
That's what's so
program.
fascinating about coming in here, because I've noticed that there's a lot of books, but you're a wealth of information yourself. But you even have things that you can hang up to help the birds, and we'll look at them later, actually build a nest,
Exactly.
which is so important. What about red-winged
Yeah.
blackbirds? Any of those in Arizona?
Well, if you have a big pond in your backyard, certainly in our water places in Arizona, we have a lot of red-winged blackbirds. But unless you have a pond in your backyard, you probably
That's right.
won't have red-winged
The
blackbirds.
reason I bring that up is I remember in kindergarten, that was the first bird I learned about. On
Oh,
Long
really?
Island was the red-winged blackbird. And I've
Yeah.
been fascinated by them
A
ever
beautiful
since.
bird.
What are some of the larger birds that we can attract into our backyards? I mean, I've seen, in my backyard here in Sedona, I've seen a lot of different hawks. Especially, I love them at night when they kind of fly right past your face.
Yeah.
But what about larger birds?
Well, hawks, for sure. And if you're going to have a feeder, where you're going to be attracting birds at your feeder, you're going to be also attracting the Cooper's hawk, which is a predatory bird, and he is preying on your feeder birds. So a lot of people, they'll see that hawk out there, and they actually see him sometimes catch a bird, which is sometimes not so pleasant, but they have babies too that they have to feed. So it's all part of the ecosystem.
So you're into the whole ecology of it. You can feed the little birds, the big birds, and we're going to get into some bat houses a little bit later. So the bottom line here, folks, is when you go to start the hobby, whether it be backyard bird feeding or even bird watching, it's imperative that you speak to someone who really knows what it's all about. For example, you know, when I was younger, I would go out with a pair of binoculars, but I had no idea what I was seeing. Boy, that's a nice bird. You know what? That's a great look. I really wish someone had taken the time to educate me, and it's such a great, great hobby for parents to do with their kids. For a couple of reasons. Responsibility, it teaches them, well, the bird feed is empty, clean out that bird water, you got to make sure that's spotless. That's number one. But number two, it's a great way to bond and teach kids about nature. Having dogs and cats, you know, I've been in animal behaviors for 30 years, having dogs and cats and pet birds and ferrets, I'm a big fan, it's a great thing. But sometimes you got to get the kid out of the house and teach him about what's in the neighborhood that doesn't belong to him. And that's where feeding wild birds in the backyard come in. We're going to take a look at some birdhouses. I build birdhouses and as a hobby. And now that I walked in here, I'm going to stop because they're so bad looking compared to what we have. So let's take a look at some first. Portia, if you could turn around and look at some of these birdhouses, tell me a little bit about these.
These are great birdhouses. This is made by an artist in Phoenix. His name is David Bruce, and he designs one-of-a-kind birdhouses.
They are one of a kind.
And he calls many of them Dr. Seussish type birdhouses because of that rickrack roof. He uses all recycled materials when he makes his birdhouses.
I'm looking like this. This is a purchase a spoon, a paintbrush. I think that's a fork and a spigot, a doorknob. Just great stuff.
Exactly. So it's really nice to support the recycling aspect of it. Plus, they're very, you know, it's an art piece. They're beautiful. A lot of people collect birdhouses in their backyard and just have a variety of birdhouses. And you may or may not get birds in all of them. But these would be designed more for like a wren size. And we do have the Buick's wren that nest in a lot of our backyards.
So also when you're buying or building a birdhouse, and I generally prefer that people, building is okay, but you got to know what to build them out of. Because if you build them out of the raw material, or if you paint them with any type of paint that contains lead, You got to be, when I bird, I use environmentally safe paint, which you got to use. But these bird houses are amazing. And I notice a lot of people at bird houses make a lot of mistakes. They don't leave the bottom where you're at the top where you can clean it.
Yes.
They don't have any vents in it for the birds. And the hole sizes are very often either too big or too small, so some of the birds don't feel comfortable. So that's important too. I'm just, and this is for these peanuts will attract the squirrels or keep them away.
Yeah, well, it will attract squirrels, but it also attracts jays. We have the scrub jay, the western scrub jay in this area. So they'll come and they'll perch on you, and then they'll pull out the peanuts, and then they'll fly away and go stash them someplace.
Stash them somewhere else.
Yeah, they
hoarding,
love to do
hoarding
that.
the peanuts.
Hoarding peanuts.
Let's take a look over here. I want to take a look at some, before we get into some of the other stuff, I want to take a look at some of the different bird houses.
Okay.
Now, obviously, these look nothing like the bird houses that I build. These are kind of more like the bird houses, or a little bit nicer. Now, with all these designs, and they're really beautiful to look at, are they practical as a legitimate birdhouse?
Well, believe it or not, even these birdhouses are practical, because the little entry hole is on this side here, and then it has very easily for clean out, you just unscrew, Phillips screwdriver, take out the back, and you can clean it out to get ready for next year's nest.
And I'm watching, this one has the same thing over here. And this one has one over here. This would look absolutely fantastic in the backyard.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at the prices, and for those people who think that this stuff is really expensive, it's not. It's really inexpensive to get started in feeding birds. Of course, unless you want to grab the whole family a pair of bird socks to put on when you're feeding the birds, it may get a little bit more, expensive. All right. So in terms of these, now. These are nice. They're nice to look at from a practical situation. Other than you want your backyard to look good. Any different than
these are perfectly fine. This is a great company, Wildlife Choice, and they make a very practical birdhouse. In that, very easy clean-out valve. You just lift up the little latch and open it up. The little striations here are designed so that the baby birds, when they're getting ready to fledge, they can actually put their little toe nails in there and climb up so they can jump out of the hole and be on their way.
So
they thought of everything.
And I see they even kind of give you, like this one says, I think, for bluebirds. And they even give you a different, so that would be a bluebird. This would be more apt for a wren?
For a wren size house. And not all birds are cavity nesters, and that's one thing that people don't realize. They think, well, if I put up a bluebird house, I'm going to get all my birds in my backyard nesting in a house. And that's not true, because certain birds are cavity nesters, certain birds build a cup nest in a tree, as we know. So depending on the birds that you have in your backyard, some will use these, some will not. We don't have bluebirds that nest here in Sedona. They nest up in the Ponderosa Pine Forest in the summertime, but bluebirds come down here and they winter in this area. So they would use this for shelter in the wintertime, but they wouldn't necessarily nest in here at this habitat, at this elevation.
So they're smart enough to look for shelter, yet they're not going to use this as their nesting. And they come in so many different varieties. And we're talking about they're made out of?
This is made out of cedar, and there's no shellac.
I'm looking, it's just plain
because
cedar.
Even though birds don't have a good sense of smell, they can detect chemicals. And any harsh chemical like paint, like you were mentioning, or a varnish of some kind, they're going to resist that.
Well, it's interesting you said that, because a lot of people that have pet birds don't realize that the most dangerous place in the house for a bird is in the kitchen. Teflon. I do a lot of parrot rescue, and it was a group that, before this whole thing with Teflon came out, they purchased a brand new self-cleaning oven that had rescued large birds, cockatoos and macaws, and they went to clean their oven and they lost their birds, and they actually took a lawsuit out and won it. That's why if you have birds in the house, stay away from Teflon. So the same thing for outside.
Absolutely.
Keep them away from any toxic areas. That's pretty much the only thing you got to worry about. What about height?
Well, it depends on the bird again. Most birds nest within between about, I'd say, a 4-foot and about a 12-foot range within there. So you have to look at the species that you're trying to attract. The Buick's wren is one that would move into the wren house here, and they can nest anywhere from about 6 feet up to 35 feet. And
the wren is all over the United States? I mean, are there certain birds that you can say, okay, it doesn't make any difference if you live in Florida or Seattle?
Yeah.
If you put this birdhouse, it'll attract this breed of bird or species of bird.
That would be a house sparrow.
Okay.
And most people don't want to attract house sparrows because they're an invasive bird. They're not native to the area. They were introduced and they've naturalized everywhere throughout North America.
Oh, those darn sparrows.
Yes. Well, the house sparrow. Other sparrows are not, but the house
All
sparrow
right,
is
good.
one.
So you would recommend, if let's say I was coming in here with a 9-year-old girl, a 9-year-old boy, twins, and I said, you know, Dina, I want to start getting the family into backyard birding. What would be the kit, the setup you would start them with?
Okay. I might first start them with a birdhouse that they make themselves.
Ah, so this is a
To
kit you
get
can
them,
put together.
so it's with a company that's, again, the very good woods that haven't been treated, and they would work together to make a house, and that'd get them started. And
So
then-
now I can buy these, put them together, and tell people I made them myself.
Exactly.
Ah.
So it gets the kit. And then I might suggest that they get a nesting ball. So this has a little bit of very untreated cotton. It's just plain cotton without any scents or colorants or anything to it. And hang it up near the house. The birds will come along and they'll pull that out and they'll start to line their nest with it, either inside of a cavity or, if you can take a look at this, you can see inside how this was in somebody's backyard and they used the nesting material.
And they put it right in there.
They put it right inside
How
the
cool
nest.
is that?
Yeah.
That's so great. And on the other side, let's take a look at some of the houses on the other side, because these are just amazingly, some of these are just absolutely decorated. I mean, these houses. Now, this would be for what type of bird?
And that's about a bluebird size hole cavity. As you can see there, it's a little bit larger than this one here, which is more wren size.
Now, do you think the birds care what the house looks like? Do you think it's just for people?
No, this is for people. This isn't for birds.
Now,
as
here's
far as they're
something-
concerned, they just want the plainest.
Here's something dear and near to my heart. When you think of bats, people think of Bela Lugosi, and they think of bats being killer animals. Now, I've had the opportunity of working with the flying foxes, the fruit bats, some of the smaller bats, some of the larger bats. And I had the opportunity of working with Dr. Tuttle, who runs the Bat Foundation down in Texas.
Right.
And I am a big fan of bat houses, yet when I walked in here this morning, the person behind the camera that you can't see said, why would anyone want a bat in their backyard? And I tell them that bats are good for many reasons. Why don't you explain why we would want to put a bat house in our backyard?
Bats are so important. Number one, they're part of the whole ecosystem that we want to keep healthy and happening, so we want to attract bats. Number one reason is because of the amount of insects that they consume in an evening. And I don't have the numbers, but huge
millions.
amounts,
It's millions,
millions of insects that they consume. So if you're having bug problems, insect problems around your house, you want to attract bats and bring them in. If you buy a bat house, they like tiny crevices that they can crawl up in and roost at night or for breeding purposes. So you would want to put them in this area where it's so hot in the summertime, more on a south and southeast facing side of the house or on a tree where they can get a little bit of shade during the hottest part of the months. And then hopefully, if you have bats in the area, they will come into your box. Bats are colony nesters, so they like to be together, and that's why we offer bat boxes with either one shelving here so they can crawl up the little striations again, they can use their nails to climb up inside, or there's one with 2 or 3 different sections that they can climb into.
And if you're a great gardener, the guano is the best thing that you could possibly use for growing. Am I right?
That's exactly right.
If you
It
go to
is.
buy guano, it's very, very, and by the
Yeah,
way,
expensive.
guano is bat poop for those people that don't know. All right, so we're into bird feeding. What about these versus bird houses? I mean, these are just,
Well, this is for water primarily, and if
Okay.
you're going to attract birds to your yard, even almost more important than food is water, especially in the arid southwest here. So having a bird bath, just a simple bowl for water to attract birds to take baths. Birds have mites, and they constantly are taking baths to get rid of those mites, and of course for drinking. So water and food.
now I noticed, I'm going to take a walk up, and you can come with me. I want to take a walk up here with you. And I noticed this water over here, and I noticed it spinning around. Now, my conjecture is that that is put there to keep the water in motion so it doesn't become stagnant, or am I wrong?
That's the good purpose for it. It's also to attract birds, because when birds see the motion of water, that's going to bring them in. If they're flying overhead, oh, there's water down there.
Ah, interesting.
I'm going to stop in and get a drink. So it's attractant for the birds, and it also keeps mosquito larvae from breeding them.
I was pointing that to someone before, because one of the biggest problems is with my water is I empty them every night, I clean them out, and I fill them with water. But I know even from a cat's point of view, from a behaviorist point of view, sometimes water that's not moving, means it's not good to drink. And that's why a lot of cats will take their paw and they'll paw the water before they drink it, and that's why cats love to drink out of faucets, because stagnant water means it may not be safe.
So it's getting aerated.
Yeah, so that's and there's so many different types of water. So if you're going to be starting to feed birds in the backyard, it's up to you to set up the entire environment. Safe place for them to go and hide, good stuff for them to build a nest, the best food you could possibly give them, and then just start out watching. What's the best time of day to watch them?
In the morning. That's when birds are most active, obviously. That's when they're feeding, that's when they're bathing. Feeding their young would be in the morning hours. And then again in the evening after it cools down, and then birds would become active again before they sleep at night.
And what about the aggressive killer hummingbirds? Is there a more aggressive bird than a hummingbird? I mean, I love them. They're the greatest to watch. But they should all be in like ultimate fighting. So these are all different types of hummingbird feeders. Now, in terms of feeding hummingbirds, I remember as a kid, I think my parents used Karo syrup in water, or they used sugar in water. I don't remember. Now they have commercial stuff. What is the safest, best thing to use if you want to attract hummingbirds to you? And there's nothing. I have one similar to this in my backyard, and I like to watch them go from one to another to another to another. What's the safest thing to use?
The safest thing is, and the easiest thing is just sugar and water.
Just plain sugar and water.
No honey.
The color doesn't really mean anything?
No, and don't use color, because
Okay.
again, it's a chemical. Birds are sensitive to chemicals, so they don't need that color. The only thing they need is one little red spot on an entire feeder. That one little red spot is going to attract them.
So it's not these things you buy at the supermarket, mix this with 3 cups of water and put it in there and it looks red or it looks blue or it looks purple, whatever.
The ratio, just remember your hand, the ratio is 1 part sugar to 4 parts water. So that's all you have to remember.
Brown sugar,
White sugar, plain white sugar.
like regular sugar you would put in
Regular
coffee.
cane sugar is the best, yeah.
So it's a 1 to 4?
1 to 4 ratio.
1 to 4 ratio. I
Exactly.
remember that. And are all these pretty much the same in terms of attracting? It's just a matter of preference in terms of
Well,
appearance in the backyard?
I was going to explain one thing. The reason why birds are so the hummingbirds are so attracted to red is because genetically they've been programmed that the red flowers have the highest concentration of nectar
I didn't know that.
out in the wilds. So red is just programmed into them. So that's what they're looking for, is anything red. So regardless of the feeder style, they're looking for that color. We all know that if you're wearing a red shirt, hummingbirds will come up to your red shirt, or even tail lights on a car. They're so attracted to red. So it really doesn't matter the color again. All of our feeders that we offer are all very, not only beautiful, but very functional.
I'm looking at it and easy to use.
Yeah. So let's just look at this one, for example. This is called, the company's called Best One. And there are a lot of Best Ones, but that's the name of the company. And you just unscrew it, easy to clean. That's a nice advantage about this one. It's just so easy to clean. Pop it off, fill it up. When you take it outside, you just gently turn it upside down and hang it up.
And how often should you, because you can fill up one of those big bottles, one of these, and it could last months. Does it go bad?
It does go bad. The sugar water will ferment, and especially this time of year when it's so
You have
hot.
some drunk hummingbirds flying around.
Could be, or sick hummingbirds,
Or sick
worse.
hummingbirds.
Yeah.
So in other words, basically the design is by choice. There's no reason whatsoever to buy something with color. They're attracted to the red that you have on all of the different, and that's why they're all red. And I'm colorblind.
Everything has red. Yeah, all of
And what about these in the back?
And this is an ant moat. So what you do is just take one of these off, you hang the hook underneath, and then this little moat you would fill with water so that ants that are climbing from your house, coming down, trying to get into the nectar, they'll get stuck in that water. And then they won't foul the water, because once ants get into the water, then hummingbirds won't come to it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
See, and that's why I'm saying there's so much information. It's more than just putting out a piece of wood in the backyard and throwing some seed on it. You need to really understand what the bird's needs and wants are. So this goes on the bottom.
Yep, so we'll hang this back up.
Now we're going to get into some other interesting things that you guys have here. Did this go here?
Yep, all right up there.
Okay. Now, once you're into feeding the birds in your backyard, once you have the birds that you want to attract coming to your backyard, the best way to keep them?
Keep feeding them.
Just
and
keep feeding them.
And keep providing water.
Food and
And
water.
we're going to see changes during the seasons with the migration. So we get reports like, oh, the lesser goldfinch are eating me out of house and home. I can't keep enough feed there. Well, it's this season when they've then taught their babies where the free food is, so they're coming to your finch feeders. And then they're going to fly maybe to the next door vacant lot where there's weed seeds that are just coming up. And we'll hear this, where have all the goldfinches gone? I don't have any goldfinches
They've
anymore.
left.
So there's this seasonality to feeding birds. And don't give up if you don't see them 1 day or 2 days or 3 days. They'll be back. So you just keep the feed happening, and they're going to ebb and flow like that.
So if they're starting in birds and they want to attract certain birds to their backyard, what book would you recommend? I mean, I'm sure the books are set up in terms of what areas, like if you live in Phoenix versus Sedona, in Santa Monica versus Long Island, New York. What books would you recommend? Are there books specific to different areas or different locations that can really help people?
There are. Let me take you back here to where the books are. So this is a good little starter guide. It's called Birds of Arizona. There is no bird guide that's Birds of Sedona, because if you were to get a guide that narrow, you would be limiting all the migrating birds coming through in the spring, all the migrating birds coming through in the fall that may not be here year-round, but you're going to be looking at your feeder and say, that bird's not in my book because they're just here temporarily. Visitors. So Birds of Arizona, this has a lot of the birds that would be coming through in migration.
And they would have like birds of New York, birds of Nevada, birds of Illinois, and so people can really, wherever they live.
Exactly.
So it's a hobby you can do anywhere. So don't say just because you don't live in a warm climate, you can't. In fact, if you live in a cold climate, it's probably even more important to feed them. So there are great books, and as you progress, there are more and more books. And I also noticed you have kids' books. You showed me this book.
Well, this is probably one of the best. It's the most inclusive as far as all the birds that could be coming through in migration. You're not going to have a bird in your backyard that's not in this book. Exactly, yeah. And some of our other guides as well.
I noticed you have books specifically for kids. And did I notice there was a Birdopoly game?
Hi there.
Play some. I mean, how do you win Birdopoly?
I've never played the game, so I can't tell you.
No, there's one called Catopoly and Dogopoly. I've never
know.
played either. But here's a perfect example. I'm assuming this is a beginner's guide to backyard birding. So, there's all kinds of great stuff. But as a behaviorist, I have seen some of the worst and best advice on the internet. So I always tell people the internet's a good place to go for advice. But unless you're getting it directly from the Audubon Society, go to someone like yourself who's been. How long have you been feeding birds?
Well, I've been watching birds for probably 20-some years and guiding bird trips and educating people about birds for a long time.
Okay, so how do you get around this image? When I was growing up, I remember that people that watched birds were God, how can I put this? Geeky. It was always the man with the dark rimmed glasses. That's changed, hasn't it? Or maybe it was never like that.
Well, I used to think the same thing. And I thought, what are all those people doing just standing around looking at birds? And then once you get started, once you buy a pair of binoculars, and you see that, at first all the birds look like little brown birds. Once you get a pair of binoculars and you see the color and the shape and the form and the beauty of these birds, it opens up a whole new world to you.
Do you ever are there birds that come to the same backyard every morning and every night so you can actually get to know them?
Yeah. And bird species, passerines typically live about 3 to 5 years. So it may not be that same one individual that you're seeing, but the family through the years that you're seeing time and time again.
So their lifespan is that short?
It is.
Compared to the big macaws, which live 70, 80 years.
Exactly.
So
the larger birds have longer lifespans.
So basically, if people want to get into either bird feeding or bird watching, they need to educate themselves first in terms of the type of seed to feed, pick up some books, what type of bird houses to use, and then once you're into it and it becomes an addiction, you take a look up on this wall here, it becomes kind of like fashionable. I'm noticing that we have all these amazing wind chimes for birds, and I actually see a lot of people walking around Sedona with these shirts on, so obviously they sell, and the other thing I like about them is that the shirts are organic. I'm assuming some of them are made out of hemp maybe, but they're totally organic as well, yeah. And then you have bird clocks and bird thank you cards and bird blouses and bird hats and you follow me, Portia? And bird night lights. And what about these feeders? These are basically just kind of?
Those I'd say would be starter bird
Really
houses.
expensive?
They could range anywhere from, $13 up to $100 for bird feeders and everything in between.
And what about these basic? Now, these are, a lot of people love these type of feeders
Yeah.
because they're real easy to clean. The glass slides out. This is a good start.
This is a great feeder. This is so easy to clean because the little tray also just pulls out, so you can hose it down and put it back in, real easy. It's a hopper feeder, so you can fill the seed from one side and then it flows out the bottom.
Self-feeding.
Yeah.
And what are these?
And these are tray feeders, so for the larger birds, like if you, even quail will jump up high and feed. Cardinals, some of the larger birds, you can put this on a pole system, and then you can see the birds just hopping around, gathering
Gathering
in
their
here.
seeds.
Yeah.
Great idea. Who would have known? Who would have known there was so many? I mean, you think of a birdhouse in the backyard, then you come someplace like this, and there are people that are. I mean, I have dog and cat mugs and bird mugs and bird candles. Let's take a look. I want to talk a little bit about these suet bags, and I want to talk about the importance of suet. How important is suet for a bird? We'll go over here. I'm following you.
Suet is really important. Like we talked about, we don't think of fat as being such an important nutrient, but it really is. And suet is made up of beef tallow. And again, for the nervous system, the development of the birds, the suet, the fat is incredibly important. So we have a mixture of different
I'm
fats
noticing
here.
sunflower, woodpecker cake, raisins and nuts, blueberries. Sounds like something I want to eat. Peanut butter suet. So different types for different birds. Is that it?
Exactly. Like the orange suet, this would attract the orioles. Typically, orioles are insect eaters, so they're getting their fat from insects, but they'll also get the fat from the suet.
And even birds, and you said this 100 times, and I say this to people all the time, that they have to have a full belly.
Yeah.
They need that fat, they need that protein.
Yeah.
That's why just seeds alone is not always the way.
And fat is a better energy source. So you think of, the sugar water for the hummingbirds being a good energy source, but hummingbirds even also eat bugs for the fat content, and so fat is an excellent, better than a carbohydrate.
And if you would start off, this is made for these, is that how it works? You put this in
Exactly,
here,
yeah.
and then you can get the larger size, or this is actually a mixture altogether already?
And that's just seed. That's just a seed log, essentially, they can hang up, and birds will just sit on the seed and eat it like that.
How many people start out by becoming backyard bird feeders and then graduate into bird watchers?
We're seeing that all the time. In Jay's Bird Barn, I lead a walk every Wednesday, open to the public. And most of these people on the bird walk started as backyard bird watchers. And then they got so into it and so interested that they thought, what other birds are out there? And then they started getting interested in the walks. And now when they go on vacations, wherever they go, they're paying attention to
I
the
saw
birds
this.
for
You
the
can't
first
believe,
time.
and they come.
Right.
You can't believe I saw. Let's talk
Exactly.
about some birds. I want to show people some binoculars up here because
Okay.
bird watching starts with a good pair of binoculars, and you can get binoculars. What's your least expensive pair of binoculars? Oh, and of course, folks,
Yep.
you got to have the hat. Without the hat, you're not a bird watcher.
The Tilly hat.
The Tilly. Is that what they call it?
The Tilly hat,
Tilly
yeah.
hat. Is that named after someone?
Well, it's the company, is the Tilly.
Oh, okay. And it's so really, you think this is just your average hat? This hat is really, really light. Least expensive.
Okay, so I'd probably start somebody with a good pair of binoculars, but I'd say mid-range. If you start with a real inexpensive pair of binoculars that you won in some raffle somewhere, you might be more frustrated than it would be enjoyable.
And not get the
And you wouldn't see the
rush that you
birds,
would get.
exactly, they're going to be blurry, you can't get it focused, it's just going to be frustrating. So I would start with a decent pair of binoculars, and that's going to be about in the $200 to $300 range. So this company is called Vortex.
That would be this one, $200 to
That would be
$300,
this one.
right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and the things that you want to look for is you want to look at the magnification. So the magnification is how close it's going to bring that bird into you. And for bird watching, the best magnification would be either an 8 power or a 10 power.
Up to an 8 or a 10 pound.
Up to an 8 or a 10. Well, 8 or a 10. So
Okay.
you're seeing 8 times greater with the binoculars than you would with your naked eye.
Okay.
And the other number that you'll see on binoculars is this number. It's 42. And that is the objective lens, which is the lens farthest from your nose, in millimeters. And that's the amount of light that's coming back to your pupil so that you can see the true colors of the birds. If it's too small, you're not getting enough light, so you're just kind of seeing dark grays, and you're not seeing the full color spectrum. If you're getting too much light, then you might even be picking up the heat waves from the pavement that's distorting the image. So you want just that right amount.
So you want to start with 8, and minimum would be, what was this, 42?
42 to 50.
To 50 is the range you want to be in.
Exactly.
And these you said about $300?
These are about $219.
Right. And so now you've been birding for, you got the hat, you got the book, you got everything you need, you got the t-shirt, you got it all. But you're really into birding now, and you say, you know, I want to see the birds as best I possibly can. What would I use next? And I think these were the binoculars?
Yeah.
And you said these binoculars would range in the dollars
Right
between...
around $2,000 to $3,000 in this range.
And again, these are 8.5 by 42.
8.5 by 42, so it's right in that range that we're looking for.
Now, what would make these more expensive than these? Is it just the lenses?
It has to do with the optics, the quality of the optics, the precision of manufacturing, the prisms on the inside, and then the lenses on the outside.
How much in terms of, I'm going to cover this because these are $2,000 and I'm not paying for them, guys. Binoculars are important, but what about comfort of binoculars? I mean, are there different people with, they're all adjustable, but are there different people that would prefer or be more comfortable with a longer one, a shorter one, a wider one? Or
Well, I think, you know, the width is adjustable, so that you can change, depending on how narrow or wide your eye set is.
Are there some binoculars where you can actually use them to take photographs?
I don't know if there are or not, actually. I've never seen those. But then the weight is a concern for people. If they don't want a heavy weighted binocular, they might go with a lighter pair.
Yeah, like these are lighter than these.
Exactly. But what we have to help with the weight is the harness strap. So a harness strap goes around the body so that it's not pulling on your neck, because that can get heavy if you're
We have
wearing
that strap
binoculars
around
all
your neck
day.
all the time, yeah.
Exactly. And when you're wearing a harness strap with your binoculars, you can't even tell you have binoculars on.
So it's kind of like suspenders type
Yep,
of thing, and they
exactly.
go on, and the binoculars are down here versus around your neck. What
Right,
a great idea.
right.
What a great idea.
Yeah.
I love all these pictures. By the way, that's the picture I was talking about before of the cat watching the bird, and the cat and the bird. Well, the bird was smart enough to realize that the cat was on the other side. Another couple of questions. I'm looking at this binocular over here. What is this? Looks like it's I'm ready to look at Mars, the moon, and
So-
Saturn.
This is called a spotting scope, and this is, a lot of birders will carry spotting scopes with them when they're birding, because it's going to bring it in that much closer. So we talked about the binoculars as being around an 8 power. So this one is between a 620 and an 80 power,
Wow.
so you're really zooming and bringing them in that much closer.
So you can have a bird way out there and just bring it in and get a great
Absolutely.
shot. Just look at all the different, I never realized how much there was involved in terms of people that just want to be backyard bird feeders and watchers, in terms of what's available to them.
As far as the bird bass, this company here, this gentleman, he makes these bird bass. He's from Kirkland, Arizona, the other side of Prescott, and he uses, again, recycled materials. This is scrap iron, scrap
Wow.
metal that he gets, and then he makes an artistic base. Then he also does the ceramics himself. He makes all the bowls himself. So just, it's an art piece that you'd have in your backyard. It's a sculpture, essentially.
So what would you say to the person that decides, you know what, I'm going to get started, I'm going to watch birds. As you said earlier, people can get easily frustrated. They go out there 2 or 3 days. I know as a kid, if I went out there 2 or 3 days and all I saw was an empty bird feeder, I'm looking for a new hobby.
Yeah.
But expect that. These are wild animals. They're not going to come at 9 o'clock exactly. They may not come on Wednesday or Thursday, but they'll pop up again on Friday. So be patient. It's worth the ultimate luck.
Well, and I always tell people, anytime you put out something new in your backyard, it's scary. Birds aren't sure if it's going to eat them or bite them, so they're kind of leery at first. Once they find out that there's food in there, then they start eating. They tell all their neighbors, cousins, brothers, sisters, and everybody's there. And then you have a feeding frenzy going on.
It's kind of like the birds have their own Facebook.
Well, not yet, but maybe soon.
I'm sure they will.
So it just does take a little bit of patience at first, but then once the word gets out, then you're going to see more and more activity. And birds have a memory. And this is a memory that's passed on from generation to generation. So with the hummingbirds, we're trying to get a hummingbird festival started here in Sedona, and we're telling everyone to put up feeders right now so that hummingbirds that are coming through in migration, which they're right now, we're in the middle of the hummingbird migration, they'll remember, oh, there was food here last time I came through, so they'll use that same route next year when they come through. So you want to be consistent and have those food sources up year after year, and then the word gets out more and more and more.
It's like
and birds keep coming.
the cat and the geese that always go back to the same golf course
Yeah.
year after year. You could build a condo on that golf
Yes.
course, and they're still going back to
Exactly.
that condo. It's that
Exactly.
built-in memory.
Exactly.
Amazing stuff. So
Yeah.
you would say if there are parents out there, watching and listening, that it would be an absolutely fabulous, fabulous hobby to do as a family, both either
Absolutely.
backyard bird feeding and then perhaps graduating into bird watching as you progress.
And it really does, as you mentioned earlier, tune people into the natural world. It slows them down and helps them pay attention to what's happening in the natural world. We're so busy with our lives that when you really start paying attention to the migrations, to the seasonal changes, it just connects you a little bit better.
There are actually studies that say whether you're watching a fish tank, an aquarium, or whether you're watching birds in the backyard, the cortisol, which is it's kind of like a chemical that kind of calms you down.
Yes.
You feel better, and the stress actually and blood pressure actually goes down. So there's
Absolutely.
medical benefits for watching birds other than just the
Absolutely.
beauty part of it.
When I lead bird walks and we're out there walking and watching and we're listening and we're quiet, people have told me it's like a meditation
Yeah.
when you're out there because you're just so focused right where you're at. You're not thinking about the debt ceiling and all the other problems going on. You're just focused right there.
And that's what I love about animals. There's some great books out about living in the moment. Animals don't care about yesterday. Animals could care less about tomorrow. There's food here now. I'm eating. I'm happy. That's how we all should live.
Exactly.
So here's my rules for you guys. Listen, you have a backyard, or you don't even have to have a backyard. There are people that live in apartments that have great opportunities to set up bird feeding stations outside. Even when I lived in New York, there were hawks in New York. People don't know that, but there are hawks in New York and the peregrine falcon as well. So if you want to start, here's what I recommend. Come into a store like Jay's Bird Barn in Sedona, Arizona, and I'm sure whatever area you live in, there's going to be some type, contact the local Audubon Society or ask your veterinarian where the best place to get information on bird feeding is. Educate yourself. Let's be fair to the birds. Don't just throw out some seed, have them eating something that's not going to be nutritional for them. The advice we gave you today, or the advice that Dina gave you today, is exactly what I recommend. Start it. It's a great hobby, but know what you're doing for your sake and for the bird's sake. And you know what? If you start with your kids now, it'll be a hobby they'll have for many